Okay, so JLever update. We are long overdue for an update, so in today's video, we're just going to be going through on what's happening with the project. We've been working overtime on the JLever and the back pressure plates and the various other components. Who would have thought that developing 5 products simultaneously was going to be a good idea? We have some bad news and some good news. Let's get all the bad news out of the way first so that we can focus on the good news. Unfortunately, we didn't win a government grant that we were hoping for. That means no team, at least till later, and it also means we'll need to adopt more of a minimum viable product approach. So things will be moving a fair bit slower. Secondly, we've decided to delay the Kickstarter for a few reasons. Firstly, we still don't have enough subscribers. We need at least a few thousand subscribers before we can even consider launching a Kickstarter. Otherwise, we'll just fail and nobody wants that. But secondly, the other reason was that we wanted to get close to a final product before we launched, because we wanted to avoid some unexpected surprises like we experienced that I'll talk about in this video. And we also wanted to get out of the way some of the smaller products that we've been working on, like the scoop and the day one container. And at this point, frankly, we might not even need a Kickstarter because we made so much progress on the back pressure plates, and tricycle developments have simplified my convoluted designs to such an extent that tooling might not be as expensive as I initially thought. We'll know in a couple of months. Now, the third bit of bad news is that the R&D on the back pressure plates have complicated things for espresso makers. Specifically, it's harder to pull a shot using manual espresso makers with the back pressure plates. And that difficulty is not just because of the pressure loss or the pressure drop across the plate. With back pressure plates, you're forcing water through the microscopic structure of the coffee grounds, which physically requires more energy or effort, which means that manual espresso makers will be even harder to work than they are presently. Now, having said that, there is a saving grace, this new pressure profile that we've developed to use with back pressure plates that we'll go through in a moment. But basically what it all means is that I've had to go back and rework the JLever. Otherwise, it would have become obsolete the moment it came out. So that's all the bad news out of the way. Let's get on to the really exciting news. So the scoop, the day one container, and the WD tool have all been handed over to Tricycle Developments, and they are in final design stages. Hopefully these items will be easy to produce and they will go into production by the end of the year as separate products. We're looking for distributors in each country, so if you're interested in stocking these, please let me know. As for the JLever, here's what's happened since our last video. I cut the high leverage arms. These were the lower leverage arms, and I was happy with the leverage adjustment mechanisms. I handed the project over to Tricycle Developments for further refinements, and in the meantime, I continued the experiments with the back pressure plates. Specifically, I want to explore the new prototypes, shot times, profiles, and answer some questions about TDS based on viewer comments. And we'll get to all of that in a second. What I found, however, was something that really affects manual espresso makers. Now, this is not absolutely confirmed, but it looks like higher pressure shots and longer shots taste better than standard shots. So even with the new high leverage arms, it was going to be uncomfortable to pull a shot using back pressure plates for some people. And we tested this. The new arms were fine for traditional espresso, but not for back pressure plates. This meant that the JLever wasn't going to be compatible with back pressure plates. And since back pressure plates really tasted better, at least according to my taste preferences, the JLever risked becoming obsolete even before it launched. So I was left with no choice but to move directly to the 2-stage ratchet mechanism that I mentioned in the previous video. I came up with 2 semi-viable designs and I did the CAD work on them. The changes would have immensely complicated the internal mechanisms. But then I had a breakthrough idea, an ergonomically optimized force modification mechanism. Let me explain. When pulling a shot with the JLever, the start and end of the shot only require really low pressures. So initially you're only pushing the air out of the puck and then you're pre-infusing. And then at the end of the shot, you're ramping down the pressure. So you don't need high leverage at these stages. However, it's at these stages that you can activate these kind of chest muscles and comfortably exert a lot of force on the arms. At the 45-degree mark, you're kind of at the peak pressure for the lever profile. But at these arm angles, it's not ergonomically feasible to apply a lot of pressure because you're in this kind of awkward position. So the arm to piston displacement function needed to be modified. The piston needs to move quickly at the start and end of the process, but more slowly in the middle, providing maximum leverage where it's needed most. So I designed the scissor lift mechanism and I built this prototype. Let's have a look at it now. So basically with the new mechanisms, you have two shafts and the distance between the shafts varies. So effectively the piston changes thickness, if you want to think of it that way. Basically there's a main shaft, but then there's a secondary shaft that these surfaces ride on with bearing surfaces in the piston. And it's kind of like a scissor mechanism in that the secondary shaft will ride on here, and at the start the scissor lift will lift the piston up very quickly. Then when it gets to this 45-degree angle stage, the secondary shaft will kind of fall on these angles as the piston moves up, and so you slow the piston as it's moving up and hence produce the higher leverage. Now, never did I dream it was going to make such a large difference, but I managed to halve the strength required from the original 100mm arms, the ones I spent 6 months testing. With the new design, you can now easily achieve 6 bars of pressure comfortably in that handle bike position just by leaning into it. Best of all, we've retained a total of about a 85mm piston chamber volume movement, and taking into account that about 25mm is lost to wetting the puck for a 20-gram dose, we end up with about a 60 to 65mm shot, and I think that's sufficient for about a 1:3 ratio for a 20-gram dose. So I'm really happy with the new mechanism. It's simple and reliable, it doesn't significantly increase the part count, and it offers other advantages, like people who want to pull smaller doses don't need to disassemble the unit to adjust some internal leverage mechanisms as I had initially planned. They can simply use the arm angles that correspond to the high leverage sections. Now, regarding other updates, by the way, thank you to everyone that has made great suggestions for features they'd like to see on the unit. I really appreciate the time you took to write comments. Some of the most frequently requested features: detachable arms and a pressure gauge. On the topic of detachable arms, we can definitely do that. A couple of people even suggested telescopic arms. The mechanism to do that might be complex and might need some testing and work. However, this feature won't make it into the first unit due to the whole minimum viable product approach now. We hope to make it available later, where you'll be able to purchase compatible and adjustable and detachable arms separately and swap them out. As for the pressure gauge, I've somewhat relented. Enough people have said that not having a pressure gauge readout during the shot was a deal breaker for them, so I have to listen to potential customers. We've decided on a location for a pressure gauge. It will mostly be situated on one of the feet and we'll have a line running to the piston, if we can make that work. Else it'll have a port on the side chamber, worst case scenario. So yes, it should have a pressure gauge at some point. However, perhaps in the first units, it will only be prepped for that feature, and we'll sell that pressure gauge at a later stage. Integrating that gauge really complicates the design. It's something that we'll need to tackle down the road, unless we make a few major breakthroughs, because it's something that we're working on right now. Lastly, we've implemented and tested the vacuum release inside the main chamber, and after testing, I do think it's an improvement over the old design, especially with the back pressure plates. It's not as convenient for traditional espresso because the puck isn't suction dried by pulling the arms back, because of course there's a vacuum release. So it does make it harder to knock out a wet puck. However, the main advantage is that now there's no need to clean the main chamber after your shot. The water just remains pristine. So for example, if you're hosting a dinner party or a luncheon, you can prepare several baskets in advance, and these baskets will be effectively air sealed if you buy multiple back pressure plates and have them in place, so they can sit around for a while. And then when it's time to make a coffee, you can pull multiple shots, exchanging baskets as fast as you boil water. And there's no need to clean the main cylinder between shots. You just reboil the water, lock in a new basket and pull a new shot. Then you put the spent baskets aside for cleaning later, and you can get back to your guests faster. Overall, I think this is a better system than having to rinse out spent grinds from the main chamber. So that's the updates on the JLever. At this point, we're doing a feature freeze. Tricycle Developments is finalizing the design, and soon we'll have a part count, quotes, and complete costings. This will help us determine where it fits in the marketplace, and then I'll make a final decision on whether or not to proceed with tooling and production but I think we're really close to an amazing product. So really excited for the JLever. Now, regarding a future Kickstarter, I'm really hesitant to launch one now that we didn't win the grant. There's a lot of overhead work on a Kickstarter, and that's time not spent working on the unit. If the tooling costs turn out to be too high for us, we'll be forced to do a Kickstarter campaign, or we might even reach out to investors. If not, we'll just do a late stage pre-order, aiming for a JLever launch sometime mid to late 2024. So that's all the news on the JLever. Now onto the really exciting news for the recent discoveries related to the back pressure plates. There are 3 of them. First, we've discovered a hypothetical mechanism behind why lever profiles produce a better and higher TDS shot compared to straight 9 or 6 bar shots. This has led us to a new, albeit semi-new, lever profile. We've also discovered 2 puck healing mechanisms, one of which may result in a new basket design, so I can't disclose that yet. The other is particularly exciting because when combined with our new prototype back pressure plates, they now possess the long sought after, what I call holy grail property of localized channel puck healing that I'll get onto in a second. Lastly, we've made significant strides in improving the manufacturability of these plates, so much so that we hope to make them available before Christmas, hopefully. So firstly, the saving grace for manual espresso makers, the new pressure profiles to use with back pressure plates, and it's yielding some truly incredible fruity sweet shots of espresso. In a previous video, I stated that the pressure differential across the grind was the preliminary mechanism that gave espresso that complex, fruity and effervescent taste. It may well turn out that there is another mechanism at play. Let's take a look at this new pressure profile for back pressure plates that we've developed. It's quite similar to a lever profile, but it has a few key differences. So first, we begin with a 2 to 3 bar pre-infusion phase, which saturates the coffee puck without causing much of a ringing effect. Then a pressure ramp and a pressure peak, all standard so far. However, the main difference is this unusually sharp and early decrease in pressure and a long, low pressure tail. So the main reason for this profile is based on the following hypothesized mechanism. We know C2O exists within the microscopic cracks and crevices of the coffee grind particles. Now, when air is compressed from sea level atmospheric pressures to 9 bar pressure on the pressure gauge, Boyle's law tells us that the air volume it occupies is reduced to 1/10 its size, or after correcting for temperature, it's actually 1/8 the size, but that's a small correction. During the high pressure phase, water is forced into these microscopic crevices in the coffee grinds from all directions. But here's the twist compared to standard lever shots. We abruptly drop the pressure before all the C2O has had a chance to escape from the grind. This allows the remaining internal air pockets to re-expand within the grind particles. Listen to this shot produced using very fresh beans. Notice that releasing the pressure slightly too early led to some interesting sounds. We believe this air expansion phase inside the grind either forces open the grind's crevices, making them more permeable, or more likely, it causes the expanding air to push the water that has entered the grind, along with the dissolved solutes, back out into the interparticular space between the grinds, making them easier to extract. I think this mechanism contributes to the vibrant tasting notes that are so typical of lever profile shots. Essentially, I think lever profiles might be a form of microscopic manipulation of flow patterns within grind particles. So understanding this, why not exaggerate the process to try and maximize this effect, hence the new lever profile. We go from a high pressure peak, which can go all the way up to 12 bars, down to a really low pressure peak. This ensures that we're opening up those grinds and making them more susceptible to an efficient extraction. So that's the reason for such a sharp pressure drop in the new profile. But that's not the only reason for the sudden pressure drop, especially when it comes to back pressure plates. During this pressure release phase, the puck expands and the apertures I discussed in previous videos open up. This re-liquefies the interparticulate space between the coffee grind particles, which then remobilizes the ultrafines and colloids. We then continue the shot during the low pressure phase, and these elements are then flushed into the cup, adding to the cup's complex body, which is needed for back pressure plates. Lastly, there is also this prolonged low pressure phase where I think sweetness seems to develop further. I made this observation because when you stop a shot near the end sometimes to taste the water that's been extracted, it's watery but sweet, not bitter, depending on the duration of the high pressure phase. I suspect that the chemical reactions responsible for sweetness might require more time and perhaps even a lower pressure and temperature, although this idea is somewhat contradictory as compared to existing literature which states that the maximum sweetness in espresso shots occur at 95 degrees, so I'm not quite sure. But if you don't believe me on this, try this. Try pulling a straight 9-bar espresso shot at a certain ratio, and then pull another shot with exactly the same coffee and ratio using a low pressure, highly filtered French press shot at 80-degree water temperatures. Taste both at the same temperature and note the difference. The espresso will be bright, fruity and effervescent, but perhaps not as sweet, while the low pressure French press shot will be smoother, sweeter, and perhaps lacking in acidity and brightness compared to the espresso shot. With this new profile, we're aiming to get the best of both worlds, the brightness and effervescence and fruity cherry cola tasting notes from the high pressure phase, as well as the body complexity and the sweetness from the low pressure phase. The result is a shot with lots of fruity, sweet clarity and very little bitterness. However, there is one compromise, the buttery mouthfeel that comes with a generous amount of crema. With this profile, you'll get only half the crema because you're stopping your shot midstream. Now it is adjustable. If you want more crema, you can extend the high pressure phase for crema production and will not drop the pressure too dramatically so that you retain some of the C2O that contributes to crema formation, but it will be slightly more bitter and complex. So that's the new lever profile. This profile or some tweaked version of it is going to be the main recommendation for the JLever when used with the back pressure plates. The JLever, the back pressure plates and this pressure profile represent the culmination of a 2-year journey in search of the perfect sweet fruit bomb type of an espresso shot. It's the best shot I've been able to create. It's easy to pull because you spend less time in that kind of high pressure phase, and I think it tastes great. I really hope you enjoy it. Now the good news is you won't need to wait until the JLever launches to taste this profile. With the back pressure plates, you'll be able to pull this profile on machines like the Flare 58 very soon when we launch the back pressure plates. With that said, I think going to take a step back from exploring the vast espresso phase space that the back pressure plates introduce for now. I believe espresso still has more secrets to reveal, but my primary goal is to provide you with the most versatile and easy to use espresso maker on the market. And I'll leave the broader exploration of back pressure plates to the espresso enthusiast community. Now let's move on to the second exciting discovery, the mechanism behind when and how back pressure plates heal channels in the espresso puck. I can't disclose one of the mechanisms just yet, but I can certainly share the main mechanism. Now there is a bit of a backstory to this discovery, so bear with me. After the first video on these back pressure plates, many people asked for samples. However, these were just hand-built kind of pre-alpha proof of concept versions. I knew they were missing a few critical elements that I wanted to incorporate into the plates of increasing importance. These are a constant flow valve. Now the pressure plates that we will launch will still not have these because using different holes you can actually adjust the amount of back pressure you can apply to the puck. So we kind of want to release the plates without constant flow valves for now. Secondly, proper water distribution, which we have now implemented in the new prototypes. But thirdly and most importantly, I foresaw the next level of complexity, what I call the holy grail for this technology, and I wanted to be the first to come up with it. That is an active microscopic mechanism that can identify excessive channel flows within the puck in certain regions and shut those channels down and divert water to less saturated areas of the puck. In other words, a mechanism that can compensate and correct for poor puck distribution by the barista. That active micro mechanism eludes me to this day, although there are some semi-viable ideas, but what I can tell you now is that it turns out there are more than one ways to skin a cat, so to speak, because we found a puck healing mechanism that works perfectly well with an original 2-layer back pressure plate design And this combination effectively delivers this holy grail property of localized puck healing, as long as the plate has a critical property. And that property is something I haven't mentioned yet, partly because I wanted to keep it a secret. But that critical property is that the plates must apply a constant compressive back pressure force on the surface of the puck, irrespective of puck height variations. Metal plates do not apply that constant pressure force because they're not flexible enough. They can correct for a tamper tilt because they tilt within the puck, and there's convex and concave flexing that happens within the metal, but that's not sufficient. So for example, even if there's a minor heaping of coffee grinds somewhere in the puck, these plates will press down on that column of heaping more than on neighboring regions. And as a result, you can have dead spots with these metal plates, depending on the grind size and how carefully you are with distributing the puck. But now that I've revealed this property, we can rename the back pressure plate technology to V-FIP, which stands for Variable Force Isocompressive Perforated Piston, i.e. the compressive force is variable in time to correct for grind size, but constant across the surface area of the puck to correct for puck distribution. So now let's have a look at what one version of the back pressure plates has evolved into. And this leads us into the third piece of good news, how easy these plates are going to be to produce. This latest design is going to be made from silicon, and it has 2 layers with distribution channels between them and an integrated porous layer on the bottom. This is very close to the final design, and Tricycle Developments is now working to finalize this design. Firstly, let's look at water distribution. Each internal channel is exactly the same length, and it's constricted so that the water flow rate is identical for each channel, and hence for each localized area of the puck. We can use an empty square basket to see where the water bleeds from, where we can see ideal distribution across the surface. And this flow rate is irrespective of height variations in the plate, due to the flexibility. You may think that the puck healing you're about to see happens because each channel is restricted to a set flow rate. But while this property might help, it's not the actual main critical mechanism that results in puck healing. Let's examine how these new pressure plates can correct for poor distribution using isocompression across the surface of the puck. So we'll go straight into an absolute worst case scenario. Let's dig a hole in the puck and tamp. Actually, this is worse than poor distribution because there's no scenario when you tamp something like this down and use it. But let's see what kind of extraction we get with and without back pressure plates. We expect terrible channeling, as we can see for traditional espresso. Let's examine the puck. You can see the large indent and the divot at the surface, but there are no dark spots or dead spots on the bottom, as you typically observe for channeling. The mechanism behind this, I believe, is an initial sideways flow of fines and superfines dragged with the flow of water across the surface of the puck and into the divot from the top layer. Then the constant compressive pressure force prevents turbulence under the divot from washing out these fines so that they remain intact and the puck is healed, resulting in good extraction, irrespective of the distribution. So that's the mechanism. Also, I can confirm these new plates result in a slightly higher TDS, but only by about 2 to 4%. Nothing to write home about as compared to a well-dialed-in traditional espresso shot. But that's yet to be independently confirmed, and of course TDS measurements are only broadly correlated to taste. So the existing plates finally achieve what I wanted, the holy grail localized puck healing, and there's no need for a complex active puck healing mechanism. This passive mechanism works really well. These V-FIP back pressure plates will essentially make distribution tools redundant. They may even go as far as leveling the playing field between expensive and cheap grinders, although I'm not sure about that last statement yet. Good even distribution will probably produce a slightly higher TDS with back pressure plates, maybe to a point of diminishing returns, but the difference between poor and excellent distribution won't matter nearly as much as when using V-FIP. So there you have it. V-FIP not only broadens the grind size, it corrects for poor distribution and potentially produces a slightly higher TDS. Its effect on taste, from what I can observe, is to brine and enhance the tasting notes while increasing clarity, but also decreasing body, bitterness and complexity somewhat, depending on the profile used. If you're an espresso machine manufacturer, both manual and motorized, and you'd like to discuss licensing on this technology, please just contact us. In the next couple of months, we hope to have manufacturer-ready sample plates for you to explore, because of course, putting aside all the advantages of V-FIP, it's still all about espresso taste. So that's it for all the updates. We're moving ahead as fast as we can. We do need more subscribers though, so if you can share this video with your friends, please do. This will likely be the last video in this format. It just takes too long to produce, and I want to spend all my efforts on finalizing the designs and toolings of the JLever, V-FIP and the other products, so you might not hear from me for a while. I'm going to be quite busy with my existing business over the Australian summer anyway. However, I do hope to make shorter videos at some stage. Thanks for watching. We'll try and do a video on the zero vapor cover and also on the no preheating test that we did for the JLever. Any comments and suggestions, please leave them below, and bye for now.